Climbing up the mountain with the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount, as expressed by Jesus of Nazareth, create a much better scenario for our world current situation. But is the obedience to these Beatitudes impossible, impractical, and dangerous in our present times? Certainly, every beatitude requires from us total surrender and obedience to its statements in order to be truly lived and its message proposal manifested fully in our lives and in our societies. Accordingly, every beatitude has distinctive features that need to be developed from our human nature in order to bring back to life a new man, a new woman, and a new earth. Here is a reflection of these Beatitudes from the metaphor of a seeker that wants to climb the spiritual mountain of her own life. First Beatitude, Ladder of Boards. Hector Perea, in his book The Respective Breads of 2006 in page 21, mentioned that Juan Diego Cuauhtlatótzin, an Aztec native of Mexico and the first indigenous Catholic saint of the Americas, who, according to the Christian tradition, was visited 4 times by the Virgin Mary in the hill of the Tepeyac of Tenochtitlan, considered himself to be a small thing. I am a little man. I am a rope. I am a ladder of boards. I am a tail. I am a leaf. I am small people, he said of himself. He was a humble person, devout, without spiritual pride, who knew himself without any grace and without value before God. Juan Diego was a poor in spirit and was also the central protagonist of the Guadalupian phenomenon that continues to this day. Second Beatitude, Lost in a Cave. Poverty of spirit leads directly to mourning for sin. Before the mourning, the longing took place. The longing for the paradise lost, for the loving Father that was rejected in the past, like the child that repents from running away from him to go astride in the company of strangers to a fallen world. The mourning that comes from the awareness of our own spiritual poverty became the first step of the prodigal son back to his father, once he came back to his senses. 2 good examples of this type of mournings that open the doors to Christ are the conversions of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, and Saint Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan order. Ignatius went to a village called Manresa in Spain, and near Manresa there was a cave, and in it he would close himself to prayer and meditation. Francisco retired also to a cave in the vicinity of the town of Assisi at the beginning of his conversion, and later in the mountains of La Verna in Italy. The fruits of these powerful conversions are known to have made our world a better place to live. Third Beatitude, the quiet route. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Wayne, in 2018, mentioned that in the Greek New Testament, meek comes from the Greek term praus, and it does not suggest weakness. Rather, it denotes strength brought under control. In the biblical sense, therefore, being meek describes one who has channeled his strengths into the service of God. It is not the lack of strength, but rather the surrender of the strength that one does possess to another for the right reasons. That makes a person meek. According to Togwell in 2007, if it is the meek, the helpless, the disabled who will inherit the earth. They will inherit the earth. And that is perhaps because the earth, God's earth, the real earth, can be had on no other terms. Fourth Beatitude, out of this world. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. We have an inconsolable longing, Piper said in 1986, that we try to satisfy with everything that our material world has to offer, but the longing remains. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity of 1952, affirmed that if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Fifth Beatitude, a forgiving guide. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. We undoubtedly live in a fallen world. It is needy and hurting. There are offenses and sins, abuse, oppression, and atrocities everywhere, said Koblenz in 1995. We have to ask ourselves in all honesty, are we a part of this oppressive system, of this social conditioning matrix, neglecting the less fortunate, oppressing the weak, and discriminating those who are different from us? To be merciful means to be moved by compassion. If we are not aware of our own smallness, chances are we won't be compassionate and merciful to others. Sixth Beatitude, ascending the hill to the kingdom. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity of heart is to will only one thing, namely full and total allegiance to God. St. John of the Cross, speaking about our love for God in his book Ascent of Mount Carmel, Book 1, Chapter 5, page 13 affirmed, thus, the one who wants to love something else altogether with God, without a doubt, has little regard for God. Seventh Beatitude, a secure abode. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. A peacemaker is a spiritual person that works in His holiness at all times. If we are indeed regenerated by God's Spirit, being at peace and making peace will be the rule of our lives. In this fallen world, with a history plagued by wars, where conflict is rampant and unfair competition and exploitation among our societies and countries is the norm, to ask ourselves if we should be called sons of God is a fair question. The Apostle Paul of Tarsus, in his epistle to the Romans 8:6-7 expressed, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor it can do so. New International Version. 8. Beatitude. The final trail to the top. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The fiercest persecution we are constantly being subject as individuals is made by the thoughts in our minds. Our egos bloom in thinking. In his article, The Beatitudes, Thomas Watson in 2018 wrote that persecution arising from unrighteous behavior is not blessed. A man may have a good cause but a bad conscience. He may suffer for righteousness' sake, yet he himself be unrighteous. Every man's sin is his king, to which he yields love and subjection. Men will not endure to have their king's sin crucified. To divide between men and their lusts, to part these two old friends, it is no wonder that it meets with so much opposition. Limassol in 2017 expressed that righteousness comes to your life when you act in accordance with God's Spirit. The godly in this life are persecuted because the wicked hate the godly. In John 15:18-19, Jesus is clear about persecution. He said, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you." New International Version.